10mm is about as close to a Magnum cartridge as we get in semi-auto pistols that is practical. So I tested 8 different loads of 10mm, breaking down roughly into 3 categories: range loads, dangerous game loads, and defensive loads. So buckle up as I go ankle deep in brass to crown winners in the ammo question. Welcome back to the Humble Marksman channel. I'm David, and I'm just stoked that you're here, and I honor the dads in the audience with this crisp high five and this joke. What's the least spoken language in the world? Sign language. Real quickly, I'd like to thank the people who did help make this video possible before we dive in. Optics Planet was generous enough to provide some of the ammunition used in the video, as well as additional magazines, as well as Kimber, who provided this 6-inch stainless target 10mm 1911 pistol. Just look at it, it's friggin' cool. Fun fact, this is one of the last guns from their Yonkers, New York plant as they move their operation down to Troy, Alabama. This will be a cool video for this pistol because it's going to be testing 8 different loads, and you're going to be able to see pretty much every shot that it took, and I'm happy to report there were no malfunctions. Part of the reason that I wanted a 6-inch barrel is I wanted the ammo to perform as well as it can. The extra inch of barrel length does give a more chance for the powder to burn off, giving it maximum velocity, hopefully a more complete burn so we see kind of maximum stability, but also because it is an iron sight pistol, the extra sight radius makes it a little bit easier to aim with so we can get a better idea on the accuracy. It's just a great shooting pistol. Plus, the super heavy big ol' slide that it's got will help protect my 9mm computer wrist from the mighty recoil of the 10mm cartridge. Now, for those of you who aren't chest deep in the reloading scene, there are some things that you need to be aware of that is going to be true of any pistol, not just this one, and that is different projectile profiles and different powder combinations are going to behave differently in every barrel. That is to say, if I throw rocks at one of your favorite loads because I think it's inaccurate, there's a good chance it's just not getting accuracy out of this particular gun. Secondly, barrels are designed to stabilize projectiles at a given speed. So the projectiles that are closest to the window that this barrel was designed around are likely to realize the best accuracy versus the projectiles that are potentially significantly faster or slower. And along those same lines, this does have an adjustable rear target sight, but I didn't have enough ammo of each of the types of ammo that we were using to zero the gun for each load that we tried. So when we do accuracy testing, realize that there is probably some elevation adjustment that needs to take place on the sight to make the gun be zeroed to that ammo. That's true of all different guns, not just this one. A lot of people just don't realize it. So let's get started with the target loads. And we had 3 in the category with the Fiocchi Target Max 180 grainers, Nosler Asp 180 grain. Now I realize those are jacketed hollow points, but the velocities are lower, which makes them more pleasant to shoot, which makes them kind of behave more like a target load than necessarily a defensive load. And then there was the Blazer 180 grain. The Fiocchi and the Blazer are both pretty affordable for 10mm, whereas the Asp, being a hollow point, is the most expensive of the lot. So there were 3 tests. We kind of put everything through. We chronoed everything. We shot it rapid fire at the 8-yard line, and we backed up to the 25-yard line and tried to group it. You can see the chrono results on the screen, but generally the Fiocchi was a little bit less potent than the Blazer, which was the most consistent of the ones that we tried, but it seemed like in the rapid fire that the Fiocchi was the most manageable and the most accurate of the loads that we tested. While the Asp was easily the most mild of the loads that we shot, I got better accuracy and better performance out of the Fiocchi. The gun just seems like it's timed to what was coming out of the Fiocchi more. So back to that whole, guns are set up for different loads of ammunition. I would say that the Fiocchi probably hit the mix for this gun probably better than the other 2. So out of the range loads, I would crown the Fiocchi Target Max as kind of the best cheap range food for the 10mm. Now, there were also dangerous game loads that I tested, and I call them dangerous game because 2 out of 3 of the loads tested have pictures of like bears and coyotes and other predators on the box, so that's just what we're calling them. They were the Buffalo Bore 220 grain, Federal Premium Syntech 200 grain, and the Fort Scott Tumble Upon Impact, or TUI. That's a ridiculous name. And it was only 125 grains, but boasted impressive velocity. 1624. 1652. So as you can imagine on the chronograph, the Buffalo Bore was the slowest of the lot, being about 20 foot per second slower than the Federal Premium, which is only like 400 or 500 feet per per second slower than the Fort Scott tumble upon impact. Do you remember when I told you about how the rifling in a gun is set up, and that's going to affect the performance of how well the gun stabilizes the projectile? A nearly 1700 foot per second projectile out of this barrel was not stabilized particularly well, but we'll get there. Starting at the 8-yard line, I was surprised that the Buffalo bore was actually the most manageable. I think it's because I had the heaviest cartridge. It had more of a shove sort of straight back into the hand. Didn't feel like it wanted to lift as much. The Federal had a little bit more of a spread at the 8-yard line, and similarly, the Fort Scott was just kind of wherever it wanted it to be. Although the Fort Scott, I can say, hands down, was the most pleasant to shoot of the lot. Backing up to the 25-yard line, expecting the Fort Scott at nearly 1700 feet per second to be the most accurate, it wasn't, because this barrel isn't set up to stabilize a cartridge moving that fast. The Buffalo bore did okay, but look at this group from the Federal Premium. That is the best group that I was able to shoot all day. Now, bear in mind, guys, I'm not usually an iron shooter, so that would be good for me with a dot nearly, except for the flyers, but that's exceptional for me with irons. And the one thing that the Federal has going for it that the Buffalo bore doesn't is I'm not ripping a hole in the ozone with my trigger finger. The Buffalo bore is hard cast, and every time you pull the trigger, it's like you're firing a black powder cartridge. At 25 yards, I had to wait for the smoke to blow away so that I could get another sight picture and shoot again. So my pick in the dangerous game segment is definitely going to be the Federal Premium, because it is kind of the best balance of everything going on there. It's a little bit faster, it's still 200 grains, but it is lights out accurate. And I figure for dangerous game, you're going to want as much distance as you can get and the ability to see the target as you shoot it. Now on to the self-defense round. I only had 2 loads to test with this, and one of them was the Hornady Custom Extreme Terminal Performance 180 grain, and the Spear Gold Dot 200 grain. And there's a bonus for you guys at the end of this video, because the winner between these 2 loads, I'm gonna shoot a water jug in slow motion. It's gonna be awesome. Starting at the 8-yard line, due to being heavier, the Spear at 200 grains kind of shoved straight back. It didn't have as much lift, and as a result, the grouping was a little bit better with the Spear in kind of that practical context. At the 25-yard line, both of the projectiles were pretty accurate. Granted, the gun needed to be zeroed for both of them. I think if I had more than one box of each of those, I probably could have gotten very similar groupings out of the cartridge. They were just very well-made cartridges. But the velocity, this is where things start to get absolutely bonkers. The Hornady Customs are 1280 foot per second at the muzzle out of this bad boy. So while there is a 10% difference in the projectile weight, approximately, there is more than a 10% difference in velocity. The Hornady Custom is just absolutely moving. So you can probably guess where I went with this, but I picked the Hornady Custom just because that is an absolutely insane cartridge. And this is what it did to that gallon of water. But both the Spear and the Hornady are excellent, excellent cartridges. You could flip a coin and be really good with either. I don't have terminal performance to look at how they expand, but they both shoot great, and I could recommend both from a shooter's perspective. So the Kimber, you saw most of the shots fired pretty much all day, but there were 0 malfunctions from the Kimber. The sight picture on the Kimber is absolutely excellent with the LPA style rear and the fiber optic front. It had a really nice trigger that has a very clean release and a, forcible reset that was pretty nice with a properly fit safety, everything. It's just a classy looking 1911 pistol. I love stainless steel pistols, and the Kimber definitely slots into that category very nicely. And before we get going, do look at the comment section. There is a pinned comment there. I might be able to help you out in some of your gun related stuff.